Hi everyone, welcome back again this week. This week's post is titled, "You Can't Numb the Dark Without Numbing the Light." So I'm curious, what do you do to cope when facing dark times? We all have our coping mechanisms, and a lot of us, as one of those coping mechanisms, use numbing. We numb to take the edge off of the difficult, challenging thoughts, feelings, and emotions that we experience in life. We might numb by drinking, by overeating, by using drugs, prescription or otherwise, by overspending. We are the most in debt, obese, addicted, and medicated society in history. But there are other ways to numb as well that on the surface may not seem to fall into the numbing category. These are things like being a perfectionist, trying to control and make everything uncertain, certain, or pretending. We pretend that what we don't do, we pretend that what we do doesn't have an effect on people. Do you see yourself in any of these numbing behaviors? So why do we numb ourselves? What is so scary that we need to take the edge off of it in order to cope? Brene Brown is a research professor and author who has spent a majority of her career studying vulnerability. And according to Brene and her work, many of us numb vulnerability. We are afraid to be vulnerable, to be exposed, to be seen, to feel that we are enough. So we take the edge off by numbing ourselves. You may be thinking to yourself, what's so bad about that? I mean, some of those numbing behaviors didn't seem all that bad. What researchers have found is that you can't selectively numb. You can't numb the dark stuff, the bad stuff, without also numbing the light and the good stuff, the joy. You can't selectively numb emotion and feeling. Another interesting thing that Brene discovered in her research is that the most vulnerable emotion that we experience as human beings is joy. What? Joy? Yes, joy. When we experience joy, we tend to immediately go to waiting for the other shoe to drop. Here's an example. Many of us are parents. Envision watching your sweet, beautiful child as he or she is peacefully sleeping. You are probably thinking to yourself how precious they are and how blessed you are to have them in your life. Your heart swells up with love and with joy. Now, if you're like many of us, your instant next thought will be one of terror. Oh my gosh, what if something happens to them? Your brain will begin to think of the worst and try as it may to prepare for the worst. We practice for something horrible to happen. We want to beat vulnerability to the punch, so we prepare for the worst. We dress rehearse tragedy. Sound it all familiar to you? I know it does to me. I've done that exact same thing. Brene calls this foreboding joy. Foreboding joy steals away the moments from us that are probably the most important in our lives. Can you really ever prepare yourself for the worst anyway? Does numbing really take it away? Being willing to be vulnerable takes courage. It says, I am enough, and my imperfection doesn't change that. It says, I'm willing to not play small so as to not be vulnerable. To be vulnerable, to let ourselves be seen, is courageous, and it's important. Vulnerability is the birthplace of authenticity and of innovation and creativity. Researchers have found that those who had the capacity and the willingness to lean into joy and feel it practiced gratitude. Now, I've mentioned how important and how transformative leading a grateful life is. And this is just one additional reason. Expressing 3 new gratitudes each day is a huge start to leading a grateful life. So I encourage you to lean into the joy through gratitude, to be willing to be seen, to be vulnerable, to experience the fullness of life, and to be your perfectly imperfect, beautiful self. Now, I would love to hear your feedback on this post. What do you think? Can you numb the dark without also numbing the light? Do you witness yourself engaging in numbing behaviors? And are you willing to be vulnerable? Drop me a comment or send me an email. I would love to hear from you. And by the way, Brené Brown is so very amazing. I highly recommend her work. She has a wonderful TED Talk on vulnerability, and she has several beautiful books. Daring Greatly, Rising Strong are 2 of them that I would highly recommend to anybody who wants a good read based on strong research and maybe wants to learn a little bit more about vulnerability and shame and being brave. So I wish you a fabulous week, a joyful week, one of leaning into the joy. Bye.